Elias Ward lived on the edge of the stars, far from the busy human worlds, and far from everything loud or harsh. He had chosen peace many years ago, and he protected that peace with quiet routines. Every morning, he left the small home he shared with his wife, Kieran, and walked into the glowing gardens of Valara. The alien planet was covered in soft purple grass, tall crystal blue trees, and flowers that shone like tiny lamps. Elias worked among them with gentle hands, trimming leaves, checking soil, and humming softly as he moved. To the Threxians who lived in the city, Elias was simply the quiet human. He spoke softly, walked calmly, and never argued. Many of them wondered why Lady Kieran, one of their respected diplomats, chose such a simple husband. They whispered that humans were emotional, unpredictable, and weak. Elias never corrected them. He did not defend himself. He only smiled in his polite, quiet way and continued tending to plants. Kieran, however, understood him well. She admired his calm heart and steady spirit. She knew there were parts of his past he never wished to speak about, but she never forced him. Their marriage was built on patience and affection, and that was enough for her. When she came home from long negotiations, she often sat beside him in the garden, listening while he told her about the strange new sprouts that appeared or the insects that made tiny tunnels underground. His voice was always warm when he talked to her, only her. Most Threxians saw him as harmless. A few even found him amusing. They were a proud species, tall and sharp-featured, with strong body structures and loud voices. To them, strength meant showing power openly. They believed Elias had none. But the truth was simple. Elias had just stopped showing it. One afternoon, as the warm sunlight fell across the garden, Elias was bent over a long row of silver-leaf vines. He was focused on cutting away a cluster of old growth when he heard the soft clicking sound of Threxian boots on stone. Without looking up, he already knew who it was. "Elias," Kieran called gently. He straightened and brushed his hands off. Kieran stood before him, tall and graceful, her dark lavender skin glowing faintly in the light. Her long crest of silver feathers shifted as she moved, a sign of quiet relief. "You worked too long again," she said. "I still have energy," Elias answered, with a small smile. "Besides, the vines grow fast in this season." Kieran stepped closer, her expression soft. "The council requested my presence again. There is unrest in the outer districts. Negotiations may become difficult." Elias nodded. "Be careful." "I always am," she touched his arm gently. "Will you be here when I return?" "Always," he said. She left for the council building, and Elias watched her go before returning to his work. He did not rush. He never rushed. But his mind was not completely calm. He had sensed tension in her voice, something she tried to hide. Still, he trusted her strength. Kieran was brilliant, patient, and brave. She could handle political storms with more control than any warrior could handle a battlefield. Elias admired that about her. As the day quieted and the sun lowered, Elias cleaned his tools and stepped into his home. He prepared a simple meal, set aside Kieran's favorite drink, and waited. She did not return at her usual time. He sat by the window for a while, watching lights flicker across the city. Valara at night was beautiful. Floating lanterns drifted above the streets, and the buildings glowed with soft blue lines of energy. The peaceful sight usually calmed him, but something in his chest felt heavy. When a distant alarm echoed across the sky, that heaviness sharpened. Elias stood immediately. Outside, people rushed toward shelter points. Threxian patrols ran down the street, shouting orders. The air trembled as power barriers activated around government structures. Elias felt a chill run through him. Every sound, every movement, every distant flash seemed to pull him back into memories he had locked away years ago. Memories of training, danger, and the disciplined instinct to move before thinking. But he forced himself to breathe. Running toward the crowd, he stopped one of the patrol officers. "What happened?" The officer looked surprised to be spoken to by a human, but he answered quickly. "A faction called the Talon Circle has launched an attack. They're targeting diplomats first." Lady Kieran was last reported inside the council hall. Elias's heart stopped for a moment. "What about security?" he asked. "Compromised," the officer said. "Most units are overwhelmed. We're evacuating civilians." Elias did not waste another second. He ran toward the council district, even as the officer shouted for him to stop. The wind rushed past him, but his mind was already racing faster. The noise, the chaos, it all brought back a version of himself he thought he had buried. As he approached the district, he saw fires in the distance, flashes of weapons, and the shadows of armored figures. Talon Circle soldiers. They moved with frightening purpose, dragging several council members into transports, and in the center of the courtyard stood Kieran, her wrists bound, surrounded by guards. Elias hid behind a support pillar and forced himself to stay calm. His hands trembled at first, but then slowly became steady. He observed the attackers, how they moved, how they communicated, how their formation shifted. These were not amateurs. They were trained, coordinated, and dangerous. One of the soldiers pushed Kieran forward roughly. Elias felt something cold and sharp twist inside him. Another soldier laughed. "Where is your little human husband? Still playing gardener?" The others joined in, their voices cruel. Elias did not move. Not yet. Not without a plan. But something in him changed at that moment. His breathing slowed, his mind cleared. All the old instincts he had kept locked away for years began to rise, silent but unstoppable. He waited until the soldiers turned away, then slipped back into the shadows. His footsteps made no sound. His presence became almost invisible. He no longer moved like a quiet gardener. He moved like someone who had once been trained to end crises before they began. As the night deepened, Elias made his way toward a storage building near their home, a place he had avoided since arriving on Velara. Inside, it was a long metal case he had promised never to open again. But tonight, that promise no longer mattered. Everything he cared about was at risk, and the silent human husband was finished being silent. Elias walked through the quiet night with steady steps, but inside him, everything felt tense. The streets behind him still echoed with alarms and distant shouts. He did not stop to look back. He kept his eyes forward, heading toward the old storage room near the edge of the garden fields. To the people of Velara, the building was nothing more than a place for tools and empty crates. Only Elias knew one section of it was different. He reached a locked compartment, placed his hand on the old scanner, and waited as the door clicked open. Dust floated in the air. As he stepped inside, in the center of the small room lay a long, metal case. Its surface was dull and scratched, and a faded human symbol was visible on the side. Elias stood in front of it for a moment, breathing slowly. He had promised himself he would never open this case again. But Kieran was now in danger. He knelt and opened the case gently. Inside, everything was exactly as he had left it years ago. The folded black clothing, the light armor plates, and a sword covered with a dark cloth. When he removed the cloth, the blade underneath shimmered with a faint, cold light. The Straylight sword. It was a human-made weapon from a secret research project, a blade designed to be impossibly sharp and impossibly durable. Elias held it carefully, feeling the familiar balance in his hand. He remembered every lesson, every day of training, every mission that changed him. He had not touched the sword since he left the vanguard, but his grip felt natural, as if no time had passed. He dressed quickly, not in heavy armor, but in a set of protective gear meant for speed and precision. It did not make loud sounds when he moved. It did not shine or glow. It simply allowed him to move like a shadow. When he stepped out of the storage room, he looked different, not louder or more intimidating, but focused. His calm expression had turned into something sharper. Every step he took now had purpose. He walked back toward the city center, the sword hidden under a long coat. The streets were quieter now, but signs of the attack were everywhere. Broken lights flickered above him. A transport vehicle was turned on its side. A few citizens peeked from behind doors, frightened and confused. Elias did not stop for anyone. He already knew where he needed to go: the council district. As he approached the large plaza, he saw Talon Circle soldiers guarding the main entrance. They were tall, armored, and confident. Their weapons glowed with controlled energy, and their armor carried the dark emblem of the Talon Circle, a sharp spiral symbolizing control and dominance. One of the soldiers noticed him walking calmly toward them. The soldier raised a hand, signaling the others. "You there," the soldier called out. "Area is restricted. Return to your shelter." Elias continued walking, his expression calm. Another soldier stepped forward. "Human, stop. This is not your concern." Elias finally paused. He looked at the guards with quiet eyes and spoke in a steady voice. "My wife is in there." The soldiers exchanged amused looks. One of them laughed. "Lady Kieran, she is valuable to us. Do not worry. We will take good care of her. Much better than you can." Elias felt the familiar pressure in his chest again, the one he used to feel right before a mission. It was not anger or fear. It was clarity. He took a step forward. The guards blocked his path, raising their weapons. "You are unarmed. Turn around and leave," the commander said, sounding annoyed. Elias reached slowly under his coat. When his hand came out holding the Straylight sword, the soldiers froze. The metal glowed faintly in the dark, giving off a strange white-blue shimmer they had never seen before. "What is that?" one whispered. Elias did not answer. He only took another step. The soldiers reacted quickly, but Elias was quicker. He did not charge, shout, or make wild moves. He simply moved smoothly, efficiently, avoiding their attempt to grab him. With a calm twist of his body, he slipped past the first two guards. He did not harm them. He simply pushed their weapons aside with the flat of his blade and stepped out of their reach. The soldiers were stunned. Humans were not supposed to move like that. "Stop him!" the commander shouted. Elias continued walking, every step precise. The soldiers tried to surround him, but he stepped between them with quiet skill, always just out of reach. It was like he could predict their actions before they made them. The commander growled in frustration. "What are you? A gardener cannot move like this." Elias finally turned his head slightly. "I was many things," he said softly. "Gardener is only one of them." He moved past the guards and entered the council building through a broken side door. Behind him, the soldiers hesitated, unsure if they should chase him or wait for orders. The commander chose to radio higher leaders instead. Inside the building, the halls were dim and scattered with fallen furniture. Elias walked carefully, listening for voices and footsteps. He knew Kieran would be kept somewhere secure but close enough to transport easily. He moved through the hallways like he had walked them 100 times, even though this was his first time there during a crisis. He passed 3 more guards in a long corridor. They did not notice him at first because he stayed close to the shadows, breathing slowly and stepping softly. When the last guard finally turned his head and saw the silhouette of a human with a glowing sword, his eyes widened. But Elias had already moved around him, using only silence and speed, not force. He made sure the guards were unharmed, but unable to follow. At the end of the corridor, he heard familiar voices. Kieran's voice stood out among them, strong, steady, refusing to show fear. She was arguing with the Talon leader, demanding answers and refusing to be intimidated. Elias stood outside the door for a moment. He closed his eyes, letting the sound of her voice steady him. Then, he opened them again, and stepped inside. Kieran turned first. Her eyes widened when she saw him, dressed in armor, holding a sword she hoped she would never see again. A mix of shock and relief crossed her face. "Elias?" she whispered. The Talon leader, a tall Threxian with sharp blue armor, looked from her to Elias and frowned. "So the human finally appears. You are causing trouble. Put down the weapon." Elias took a slow breath. "She is coming with me." The leader laughed. "You think you can take her from here? Alone?" Elias did not answer in words. His silence, steady posture, and the faint glow of his sword were enough of a reply. For the first time, the Talon leader looked uncertain. Elias stepped forward, prepared to do whatever he must to protect Kieran without harming anyone more than necessary. The silent husband was gone. The quiet shadow from the past had returned, and everything in the room began to shift. Elias stood in the quiet room with the glowing sword in his hand while Kieran watched him with wide, shocked eyes. She had always known he carried secrets, but seeing him like this calm, focused, moving with the precision of someone trained for danger was something she had never imagined. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the Talon Circle soldiers around her seemed unsure of what to do. They had expected a frightened human, not a man who walked with steady confidence and eyes that saw through every threat. The leader of the Talon Circle, Sorak Veth, looked Elias up and down with irritation. Sorak was tall, even for a Threxian, with armored plates that shone like ice. His voice was sharp when he spoke. "You are outnumbered," he said. "Put the sword away and step back." His tone suggested he expected obedience. Elias did not move. He simply held the sword at his side, relaxed but ready. "Let her go," he said softly. "This does not need to become worse." Sorak blinked, surprised by the even tone. "You think you can command me?" he asked. Then, he laughed in disbelief. "You are one man." Elias's expression remained calm. "Sometimes one is enough." A murmur passed through the Talon soldiers. They did not understand what made the humans so confident. To them, humans were emotional and clumsy. But Elias stood like someone who had already measured the room, every corner, and every exit. He knew exactly what he would do if they tried to stop him. Kieran stepped forward slightly, despite her bound hands. "Sorak, release me," she said firmly. "You know this is unlawful. The Concord will." "The Concord is already cracking," Sorak interrupted. "With you out of the way, our plan will move faster." Elias's eyes narrowed slightly, but he stayed silent. He let Sorak talk. Sorak seemed to enjoy the sound of his own voice. "You want to know what your diplomats never understood?" Sorak continued. "Your ideas of cooperation and peace made the Concord weak. We will rebuild it our way. Way. "That is not rebuilding," Kieran replied. "That is taking power by fear." Sorak waved a hand dismissively, then turned back to Elias. "As for you," he said, "you are inconvenient, but I will give you one chance. Walk away, and forget what you saw." Elias tilted his head. "I do not forget things easily." Cruz. Elias. Cruz. Something about the way he said it made the soldiers uneasy. They shifted their positions, glancing at Sorak for direction. Sorak's jaw tightened. He raised his arm slightly, signaling them to step forward. Kieran saw what was coming and shook her head quickly. "Stop," she said. "All of you. He is not what you think he is." But the soldiers did not listen. They moved in slowly, trying to surround Elias. Elias breathed in once, deeply, letting the air fill his lungs. His mind shifted into a place he had not visited in years, a state of alert, controlled, calm. He did not want to harm anyone. He did not want to fight. But he was ready to act, if needed. The first soldier tried to grab his arm. Elias sidestepped smoothly, letting the hand pass harmlessly through the air. Another soldier reached for him from behind, but Elias stepped aside again, creating space without using force. Each movement was gentle and clean, like he was guiding them instead of resisting them. The soldiers grew more frustrated with every missed attempt. Sorak frowned. How is he doing that? Chiron knew. She watched Elias move and understood suddenly that he was not just avoiding danger, he was shaping the situation. He was choosing every step carefully, removing risk without causing harm. It reminded her of the old stories about human specialists who solved difficult problems not with strength, but with precision. Elias positioned himself between Chiron and the soldiers, keeping the sword low and his voice calm. I don't want to hurt any of you, he said. Please, don't do this. But Sorak's pride was too large. He stepped forward with a sharp glare. Enough, he said. You will obey. Ansis. Chiron looked at Sorak with disappointment. Sorak, this will not end the way you think. Be quiet, he snapped. Elias's eyes flicked to her for a brief moment, a silent promise that he had a plan. Then, he moved again, not attacking but weaving through the soldiers in a way that left them confused. They reached for him, but he slipped from their grasp like water through fingers. He did not push, strike, or even threaten. His skill alone was enough to break their rhythm. Sorak grew angrier. Useless, he barked at his men. You're letting a human embarrass you. Embarrass was the right word. Threxians valued pride more than safety. Being outmaneuvered by a smaller, quieter human was the last thing they expected. Their frustration made them less coordinated. Elias noticed it immediately. The moment the soldiers lost discipline, Elias acted. He moved behind Sorak with a swift, careful step and placed the flat of the sword gently against Sorak's armor. Not harming, not pressing, just showing he could. The room froze. Sorak stiffened. His soldiers stared in disbelief. Chiron's breath caught quietly in her throat. She had never seen Elias move like this. He looked calm, almost peaceful, but with a strength that came from long-forgotten training. Elias spoke in a low voice. Please stop. I am asking you, not threatening you. Sorak swallowed, the sound loud in the silent room. Elias stepped back and lowered the sword. A husband, he said softly, and a man who wants his wife safe. For a moment, it looked as if Sorak might listen. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. But then the sound of heavy footsteps came from the hall outside, more Talon soldiers arriving. Sorak's confidence surged again. Reinforcements meant he no longer felt cornered. You cannot win, Sorak said smugly. Not against all of us. Elias did not reply. He glanced at Chiron instead. She understood the look. There was no fear in his eyes. Only determination. The new soldiers rushed in, surrounding Elias in a tight circle. He tightened his grip on the sword slightly. Not to attack, but to prepare. Chiron raised her voice. Elias, be careful. Elias nodded once. Always. Then he moved into the next phase, not violence, but escape. He shifted toward the nearest wall, using the soldiers' momentum against them. They crowded in, trying to trap him, but Elias slipped through the smallest gap and guided their movement in the wrong direction. They collided gently, stumbling, giving him a path. Chiron saw an opportunity and stepped forward quickly. Elias reached her side, caught her arm carefully, and steadied her as she stumbled from her bindings. Together, they moved toward a back exit Elias had noticed earlier, a small maintenance door no one else had considered. Sorak shouted at his soldiers to stop them, but Elias and Chiron had already reached the door. Elias pushed it open, guiding her through it first. As they slipped into the passage beyond, Chiron looked at him with a mixture of relief and awe. Elias, she whispered. How long have you been hiding this part of yourself? He closed the door behind them and locked it. Long enough, he said quietly. But I cannot hide it tonight. Kieran squeezed his hand. Thank you. Elias gave her a small, tired smile. We're not done yet. They will come for us. Then we face them together, she said. Elias looked ahead into the dim passage. Together, he agreed. And with that, the silent husband and the captured diplomat began their escape through the shadows of the Concord city, united, determined, and heading toward a future neither of them expected. Elias and Kieran moved carefully through the narrow maintenance passage, their footsteps quiet on the metal floor. The sound of alarms echoed from somewhere above them, but the passage itself was dim and still. Elias kept one hand on the wall, guiding them through turns and small stairways he had memorized during his years exploring the city. Kieran stayed close to him, her bound wrists held together as she walked. After a few minutes, Elias stopped and gently touched her hands. Hold still, he whispered. He took a small tool from his belt, something he kept for garden repairs, and used it to unlock the restraints around her wrists. The bands fell away with a soft click. Kieran flexed her hands, relief showing on her face. Elias nodded. We need to move quickly. They will search this area soon. They walked again, the soft hum of the emergency power lights guiding them forward. Kieran glanced at Elias several times, still trying to understand the change she had seen in him. You planned everything, she finally said. Even inside the council room, you were thinking ahead. Elias kept his eyes forward. It is how I was trained. I try not to use it unless I must. But why did you hide it for so long? He paused at a corner, checking for danger before answering. Because I wanted a life where I didn't have to be that person anymore. I wanted something peaceful. When I married you, I promised myself I would never bring my past into your world. Kieran touched his arm lightly. Your past is not a burden, and you did not bring it into my world. The crisis did. Elias gave her a small smile, grateful for her understanding. Maybe so. But I still wish you never had to see this part of me. They continued deeper into the passage until they reached a service lift. Elias pressed the controls, and the lift doors opened with a quiet hiss. Inside, the space was small but clean. They stepped in, and Elias selected a level far under the city. Kieran raised an eyebrow. Where are we going? To the old energy tunnels, he replied. They run beneath the city. If we move through them, we can leave the district. Without being seen, the lift began to descend. The air inside grew cooler, and the lights flickered as they passed each level. Kieran took a slow breath. Elias, Sorak said something earlier, she said. He said the Concord is cracking. Do you think the Talon Circle planned this for a long time? Yes, Elias answered softly. Their moves were too coordinated. They knew where to strike first. Then the Concord is in more danger than we thought. Yes, Elias said again. But we can still stop them. We just need proof of their full plan. The lift reached the lower tunnel, and the doors opened. A long, circular corridor stretched in both directions. The walls glowed faintly, powered by old energy lines. Stay close, Elias said. They walked side by side through the quiet tunnel. Kieran studied him as they moved. You seem so different now, she whispered. But at the same time, you're still you. Elias glanced at her. What do you mean? You still speak calmly, she said. You still think before acting. Even when things were dangerous, you didn't harm anyone. You stayed gentle, even in crisis. Elias slowed a little, surprised by her words. I don't want to hurt people, he admitted. Even when I must act, I try to choose the safest path. That is why I trust you, Kieran said. Not because of the sword, not because of your skills, but because you use them carefully. Elias felt warmth in his chest, a feeling that gave him strength. Thank you, he said quietly. They continued for a while, until they reached a large chamber where several tunnels connected. We are close to the old relay station, he said. If we reach it, we can access communication lines and send a warning to the Concorde. Kieran nodded. Then let's hurry. Just as they stepped toward the next tunnel, a soft, whirring sound echoed behind them. Elias turned quickly. A drone hovered near the ceiling, its blue lens glowing as it scanned the tunnel. Kieran stiffened. A Talon scout. Elias raised a hand gently. Stay calm. It has not identified us yet. Since the drone floated forward slowly, shining a beam of light across the floor. If it recognized them, it would alert every Talon soldier in the city. Elias moved carefully, stepping slightly to the side where shadows pooled. He signaled Kieran to do the same. The drone scanned the area, paused, and then beeped softly before drifting away into another tunnel. Only when the sound faded did Elias let out a quiet breath. That was close, Kieran whispered. Too close, Elias said. They are already searching the lower levels. They walked again, faster this time but still quiet. As they approached the relay station, they heard faint voices up ahead. Elias stopped and listened. Talon soldiers, he whispered. They're checking the relay room. Kieran frowned. We need that room. Yes, and we can reach it without being seen. He guided her toward a small maintenance opening in the wall. It led to a narrow walkway above the main floor of the relay station. The walkway was dusty, filled with old pipes and cables, but it allowed them to move without making noise. Below them, 4 Talon soldiers inspected control panels. Elias watched their movements carefully. They were focused on equipment, not on the hidden walkway above. Kieran leaned close and whispered, Can you operate the relay without them noticing? Yes. But I need to reach the far end, where the old communication panel is. Kieran nodded. Then I will distract them from below. Elias looked at her quickly. That is too risky. Kieran shook her head. You risked yourself for me. Let me help you now. Before he could argue further, she reached the end of the walkway and slipped down a ladder silently. She stepped into the room with calm confidence and cleared her throat. The soldiers turned, startled. Elias stayed hidden but moved across the walkway quickly, using their distraction to reach the old panel. Kieran stood tall, speaking calmly to the soldiers, keeping their attention without provoking them. She asked questions, pretended confusion, and acted as though she had simply gotten lost in the tunnels. The soldiers, unsure of what to do with her, hesitated. They argued quietly, giving Elias enough time to access the panel. He tapped the controls, bypassing several blockers, and finally activated a hidden emergency channel. A small screen lit up with the Concorde emblem. Elias transmitted a message with simple, clear instructions. The Talon Circle was launching a coordinated takeover, starting with diplomats. He gave the coordinates and evidence he had gathered silently through the council building. The message sent successfully. At the same moment, Kieran stepped back from the soldiers, still keeping them occupied. Elias finished and whispered, Kieran. Now. She understood immediately. She pretended to retreat in fear, giving him time to climb down from the walkway. They escaped through a side tunnel, before the soldiers realized anything had changed. Once they reached a quiet corner of the tunnels, Elias looked at her with admiration. You did perfectly. Kieran smiled softly. I learned from you. Elias felt a rare warmth in his eyes. The Concorde knows now. Help will come. Kieran nodded. And Sorak will not be able to hide anymore. Elias took her hand gently. We only have one task left. Kieran squeezed his hand. Yes. We need to stop Sorak's final plan. Side by side, they walked deeper into the tunnels, heading toward the heart of the Talon operation, ready to end the crisis together. Elias and Kieran moved through the deep tunnels with quiet determination. The soft hum of old energy lines echoed around them, guiding their steps toward the center of the Talon Circle's hidden base. The deeper they went, the more the air grew warm and bright with pulsing lights. It was clear they were getting close to something important. Chiron adjusted the communicator on her wrist, which Elias had repaired during their walk. "The Concord should receive your message soon," she said. "If they react fast, reinforcements may already be on their way." Elias nodded. "We need to slow Sorak's plan long enough for help to arrive." "What do you think he is planning?" she asked. "He mentioned rebuilding the Concord in his own image," Elias said quietly. "That means he needs something powerful, something that can disrupt normal systems." Kieran frowned. "The energy nexus." Elias stopped for a moment. "Where is it?" "Directly under the city," she said. "These tunnels connect to it. If Sorak controls it, he can cut power, communication, and even protective shields. The whole capital would be at risk." Elias tightened his grip on the sword not to use it, but to remind himself he was prepared. "Then that is where he will be." They continued until the tunnel opened into a large, circular chamber filled with glowing pillars. In the center stood a platform surrounded by soft blue light. This was the energy nexus, a peaceful, humming heart that powered the entire region. Elias and Kieran stayed behind a cluster of old machinery as they looked around the chamber. Several Talon engineers worked near the control columns, adjusting settings and giving quiet instructions. At the far end of the platform stood Sorak himself, wearing a control device on his arm, and staring at the main console with intense focus. Kieran whispered, "He wants to override the whole system." Elias watched the patterns on the columns change slowly. "He is already halfway through the process." "We have to stop him before he finishes," she said. "But we cannot fight all those guards." "We don't need to fight," Elias replied. "We only need to think faster." He studied the engineers carefully. Their movements were careful, but distracted. They were too focused on Sorak's orders to notice anything else. Elias then looked at the control columns, searching for a weak point. "The Nexus has a manual safety lock," he said. "Do you know where it is?" Kieran nodded instantly. "Yes. It's behind the central column. Only authorized diplomats know the sequence." "Perfect," Elias said softly. "If you activate the lock, the system will pause and ask for a full council review. Sorak cannot override that alone." "But the guards," she began. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "I will draw them away. You move to the lock as soon as the room clears." Kieran hesitated. "Elias." He nodded. "I will not harm anyone. I will only distract them. And I trust you. Endizan. 2000. Kieran's eyes softened. "Then, let us do this together." Elias stepped away from the shadows and moved onto the platform with slow, deliberate steps. The guards turned immediately, startled to see him, but Elias raised his free hand peacefully. "I am unarmed," he called out, not mentioning the sword hidden behind his coat. "I only want to talk." Sorak spun around, eyes wide with anger and disbelief. "You again? You escaped the tunnels and followed us here?" "I came for my wife," Elias said simply, "and to stop you." Sorak laughed, though frustration cracked the sound. "Stop me? You cannot. My plan is already in motion." Elias stepped further out, making sure all eyes were on him. "Your plan harms innocent people. You know that." Sorak hesitated for the briefest second, something flickering in his expression. But pride quickly covered it. "You speak of innocence," he said. "You humans hide behind soft words and simple lives. But you still try to interfere with things greater than you." Elias met his gaze calmly. "Greatness is not about control. It's about responsibility. Greatness, it's not about control." The words carried across the chamber, soft but steady. Some of the engineers shifted uncomfortably, unsure anymore if Sorak was making the right choice. Sorak growled and raised his hand. "Guards, remove him." The soldiers approached Elias carefully. But he did exactly what he told Chiron he would. He moved back, letting himself be chased, stepping around equipment with graceful ease. He never struck or pushed. He simply led the guards in a slow circle around the chamber, always staying just out of their reach. The distraction worked perfectly. Chiron slipped behind the central column unnoticed and knelt beside a small metal panel. She pressed her hand against it, and a soft light appeared. She entered a code quickly, her fingers moving with practiced confidence. Behind her, the guards grew frustrated as Elias continued to guide them away from the central area. Elias kept his movements calm and controlled, making the chase seem almost like a strange dance. Then Chiron pressed the final button. The entire chamber pulsed with a deep blue light. Sorak's head snapped toward the central column. "No!" He rushed forward, pushing past his own engineers, but the system had already begun to shift. The glowing pillars dimmed slightly, and a large symbol appeared on the main console, an official seal of the Concord Council. "Manual lock activated," an automated voice said. Sorak slammed his hands against the controls. "Override. Override now." The console flashed a warning. "Override denied." Chiron stepped out from behind the column. "Your plan is finished, Sorak." Sorak spun toward her, rage burning in his eyes, but he froze when he saw Elias standing nearby, calm and steady, not threatening, simply present. "You cannot defeat the Concord," Chiron said. "You cannot take control through fear." Sorak opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of approaching voices echoed from the tunnel entrance. A moment later, a group of Concord peacekeepers entered the chamber, guided by the emergency message Elias had sent earlier. They surrounded the room, taking positions between the Talon soldiers and the Nexus. Their leader stepped forward. "Talon Circle Forces, stand down. You are ordered to cease all operations immediately." Sorak looked around in disbelief. His plan, perfect in his mind, had collapsed. He looked at Elias as if seeing him for the first time, not a quiet human husband, but a calm, capable man who had changed everything without causing harm. "You," Sorak whispered. "How did you do all of this?" Elias met his gaze. "By choosing peace, even when you did not." The peacekeepers took control of the chamber and escorted the Talon members away. Sorak went last, still stunned, still trying to understand how one quiet human had undone him. As the chamber settled into calm, Chiron walked to Elias and placed her hands gently on his shoulders. "You saved the Concord," she said softly. "And you saved me." Elias lowered the sword and let out a slow breath, the tension finally easing from his body. Chiron smiled warmly. "Then, your quiet life was never a weakness. It was your strength." Elias looked around the bright chamber, the crisis fading into memory. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I am ready to return to our life now." "The calm one." Chiron took his hand. "We will. The worst is behind us." Together, they walked out of the Nexus chamber as the peacekeepers secured the area. Light filtered through the tunnels, guiding them back toward the surface, back toward their home. And though Elias was still the same gentle man he had always been, everyone who heard the story afterward would forever remember the truth. The silent human husband was only silent by choice. And when he finally raised his sword, everything shifted for the better.